June 19, 1944, 0545 hours. Philippine Sea, 160 miles west of Saipan. Task Force 58 cuts through heavy swells at 32 knots. 15 Essex-class aircraft carriers arranged in 4 task groups spread across 50 square miles of dark ocean. Admiral Marc Mitscher stands on the flag bridge of the American fleet carrier USS Lexington, his weathered hands gripping binoculars that have tracked Japanese aircraft from Guadalcanal to the Central Pacific. 956 American aircraft crowd the flight decks of the largest concentration of naval airpower in human history. The stakes are absolute. Control of the Marianas Islands, bomber bases within 1,200 miles of Tokyo, and the survival of Japanese naval aviation itself. The Essex-class carriers represent American industrial might transformed into floating airfields. Each ship displaces 27,100 tons at standard load, stretches 872 feet from bow to stern, and carries between 90 and 100 aircraft. Their construction time averaged 16 to 20 months compared to the 3 to 4 years required for pre-war carriers. Newport News Shipbuilding, Brooklyn Navy Yard, Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, Norfolk Navy Yard, and Four River Shipbuilding have delivered these vessels at a rate of 1 every 2 months since 1943. The numbers tell the story of a nation at total war. 32 Essex carriers ordered, 24 completed, 17 commissioned during World War II. Not one has been lost to enemy action despite facing everything from bombs to kamikazes to typhoons. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet approaches from the west with 9 aircraft carriers of its own. 5 fleet carriers including the massive Zuikaku and 4 light carriers steam in formation with battleships Yamato and Musashi, the largest warships ever built. 430 Japanese aircraft prepare for what their commanders call the decisive battle that will restore Imperial Navy dominance in the Pacific. But the pilots climbing into Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters and Yokosuka D4Y dive bombers are not the elite airmen who attacked Pearl Harbor. Most have fewer than 6 months training. Their experienced predecessors died over the Solomons at Rabaul during the battles that consumed Japanese naval aviation 1 squadron at a time. Mitscher's flagship USS Lexington CV-16 embodies everything learned from 2 years of carrier warfare. Her hull incorporates special treatment steel, a nickel-chromium alloy that provides armor protection while remaining fully structural rather than deadweight. The flight deck measures 870 feet by 109 feet. Wooden planks laid athwart ships in steel channels designed to flex under the impact of landing aircraft weighing up to 12,000 pounds. 3 aircraft elevators can cycle in 45 seconds, moving fighters and bombers between the hangar deck and flight deck faster than any previous carrier design. 12 5-inch dual-purpose guns in twin and single mounts provide the primary armament, controlled by Mark 37 fire control directors, equipped with Mark 4 radar that can engage aircraft at ranges exceeding 7 miles. The carrier's air group reflects the evolution of American naval aviation from the desperate days of 1942. Air Group 16 consists of 40 Grumman F-6F Hellcat fighters, 36 Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers, and 18 Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers. The Hellcat mounts a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine generating 2,000 horsepower, enabling a top speed of 380 miles per hour and a service ceiling of 37,000 feet. 6 Browning 50 caliber machine guns provide firepower that can destroy any Japanese aircraft in a single burst. The pilot sits behind armor plate and in front of self-sealing fuel tanks that prevent the catastrophic fires that claimed so many early war fighters. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell leads Fighting Squadron 15, the most successful fighter unit in American naval history. His pilots have trained for months in tactics specifically designed to exploit Japanese weaknesses. The Thatch Weave maneuver allows slower American fighters to defeat more agile Zeros through coordinated defensive flying. Boom and zoom attacks use superior speed and diving performance to engage and disengage at will. Most critically, American pilots train extensively in deflection shooting and high-speed gunnery, skills that Japanese training programs cannot match with shortened curricula and insufficient fuel for practice flights. Below decks, USS Lexington's Combat Information Center represents a revolution in naval warfare coordination. Banks of radar displays show the tactical picture across 360 degrees and from sea level to 30,000 feet altitude. The SK Air Search Radar can detect formations of aircraft at distances exceeding 100 nautical miles. SG Surface Search Radar provides navigation and ship tracking capability with ranges up to 75,000 yards. Most importantly, for channel VHF radio systems allow fighter directors to coordinate the actions of dozens of aircraft simultaneously, vectoring combat air patrol fighters to intercept incoming raids with precision impossible in earlier battles. Task Force 58 operates as 4 separate task groups, each built around 3 to 4 aircraft carriers and screened by battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. Task Group 581 under Rear Admiral Joseph Jocko Clark includes carriers Hornet, Yorktown, Belleau-Wood, and Bataan. Task Group 582 under Rear Admiral Alfred Montgomery consists of Bunker Hill, Wasp, Monterey, and Cabot. Task Group 583 under Rear Admiral John Reeves operates Enterprise, Lexington, San Jacinto, and Princeton. Task Group 584 under Rear Admiral William Harrill commands Essex, Langley, and Cowpens. The screening vessels include 7 fast battleships of the Iowa and South Dakota classes. Their 16-inch guns providing anti-aircraft fire support and surface protection for the carriers. The formation tactics developed by Mitscher and his staff maximize both offensive capability and defensive protection. During daylight hours when air attack probability is high, the task groups operate in Formation 5VD, with carriers arranged in a rough circle surrounded by screening vessels at distances of 6,000 to 9,000 yards. The combined anti-aircraft firepower of an entire task group creates a defensive umbrella that has proven nearly impenetrable to Japanese attack aircraft. At night and during periods of low visibility, Formation 5VN places carriers closer together for enhanced mutual protection while maintaining anti-submarine screening. Japanese intelligence has consistently underestimated American carrier strength and capabilities. Admiral Somu Toyota, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, believes he faces only 7 or 8 American carriers with inexperienced air groups. In reality, Task Force 58 fields 15 fleet carriers plus 8 light carriers of the Independence class, carrying nearly 1,000 aircraft flown by pilots who average more than 400 hours of flight training. American pilot production has reached 800 new aviators per month compared to Japan's maximum output of 100. The mathematics of attrition warfare heavily favor the United States, but Japanese commanders continue to plan operations based on optimistic assessments of their own capabilities and pessimistic estimates of American strength. Admiral Ozawa's battle plan depends on supplementing his carrier aircraft with land-based planes from airfields on Guam, Rota, and Tinian. Operation AGO calls for coordinated attacks by approximately 750 aircraft against the American invasion fleet supporting the Saipan landings. Japanese planners expect their longer-range aircraft to engage American carriers while remaining outside the effective striking distance of American planes. The Mitsubishi A6M0 still maintains superior range compared to the F-6F Hellcat, and Japanese doctrine emphasizes exploiting this advantage through hit-and-run tactics that avoid prolonged engagement with heavily armed American formations. But Task Force 58's preliminary operations have already shattered the foundation of Japanese planning. Airstrikes on June 11th and 12th against Marianas airfields destroyed most of the land-based aircraft that were supposed to support Ozawa's carrier planes. Attacks on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam eliminated approximately 300 Japanese aircraft on the ground and in the air, leaving Ozawa with only his carrier-based force to execute a mission planned for twice as many planes. American pilots reported minimal aerial opposition and extensive damage to runways, hangars, and fuel storage facilities. The island bases that should have been unsinkable aircraft carriers had been neutralized before the main battle began. The technological gap between American and Japanese aircraft has widened dramatically since 1942. The F-6F Hellcat incorporates lessons learned from captured Zero fighters examined at Wright Field and from combat reports filed by pilots who survived early encounters with Japanese fighters. The Hellcat trades some maneuverability for superior speed, firepower, and structural strength. Its .650 caliber machine guns fire armor-piercing incendiary rounds that can destroy any Japanese aircraft with a short burst. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine provides reliable power at high altitudes where Japanese radial engines lose effectiveness. Most critically, The Hellcat can outdive any Japanese fighter and maintain control at speeds that would tear apart a Zero. The Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver dive bomber represents the evolution of American attack aircraft toward heavier, more versatile designs. Despite its troubled development and initial unpopularity with pilots who nicknamed it "son of a bitch second class," the Helldiver carries a 1,000-pound bomb load internally plus external ordnance on wing pylons. Its R-2600 twin Cyclone engine enables a cruising speed only 2 miles per hour slower than the F-6F Hellcat, making it nearly as fast as the fighters it accompanies on strike missions. The internal bomb bay reduces drag and allows precision attacks from steep diving angles that Japanese aircraft cannot match. Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers have evolved far beyond their original role as torpedo attack aircraft. The failure of American torpedoes during the early war years led to adaptation of the Avenger for level bombing, reconnaissance, and special missions requiring a radar operator. The three-man crew includes a pilot, bombardier navigator, and radio operator gunner who can coordinate with ship-based fighter directors to provide real-time intelligence on enemy movements. Some Avengers carry ASV radar for surface search and navigation, making them invaluable for long-range strikes and recovery operations in poor weather conditions. At 0600 hours, radar operators aboard multiple ships in Task Force 58 detect the first Japanese reconnaissance aircraft approaching from the west. The contacts appear as small blips on SK radar screens at ranges exceeding 100 miles, giving American commanders nearly 30 minutes warning before the scouts reach visual range of the task force. Fighter directors in the combat information centers immediately vector F-6F Hellcats from the standing combat air patrol to intercept the Japanese planes before they can report accurate information about American ship positions and courses. The interception demonstrates the effectiveness of American fighter direction techniques developed over 18 months of Pacific combat. Lieutenant Commander Charles Brewer leads a 4-plane division of Hellcats from USS Essex, guided by radar vectors and radio instructions from Fighter Direction Officer Lieutenant Robert Winston aboard USS Lexington. The American fighters climb to 25,000 feet and position themselves between the Japanese scouts and Task Force 58, using altitude and sun angle advantages to achieve surprise in the attack. 2 Nakajima C-6N reconnaissance planes are shot down before they can radio contact reports, while a third escapes damaged and streaming fuel. Japanese Admiral Ozawa has committed his fleet to battle based on incomplete intelligence and optimistic assumptions about American weaknesses. His mobile fleet includes fleet carriers Zuikiku, Shokaku, and Taiho of Carrier Division 1, plus light carriers Chitose, Chiyoda, and Zuho of Carrier Division 3. Carrier Division 2 consists of fleet carriers Junyo and Hayo plus light carrier Ryuho. The 9 carriers embark approximately 430 aircraft, but the quality of pilots and planes has deteriorated severely since the elite units that dominated the early Pacific War. Most Japanese pilots have fewer than 6 months of flight training compared to the 12 to 18 months provided to American aviators. Fuel shortages have limited practice flights to essential training only, leaving many pilots unfamiliar with advanced tactics like coordinated attack patterns and defensive formations. The aircraft themselves suffer from material shortages that compromise performance and reliability. Zero fighters lack self-sealing fuel tanks and armor protection that are standard on American aircraft. The Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bomber is fast but fragile, prone to fires when hit by even light anti-aircraft fire. At 0730 hours, Admiral Ozawa orders the launch of the first attack wave against Task Force 58. 69 aircraft take off from the 3 carriers of Carrier Division 3, consisting of 45 Zero fighters, 16 Judy dive bombers, and 8 Nakajima B-6N JIL torpedo bombers. The mixed formation assembles over the mobile fleet and sets course east toward the reported position of American carriers. Lieutenant Masahiko Yamaguchi leads the fighter escort, flying a Zero that has been modified with additional fuel tanks to extend its combat radius. His pilots are among the most experienced in the mobile fleet, veterans of battles over Rabaul and the Solomons who understand the lethality of American fighter opposition. Task Force 58's radar network tracks the incoming Japanese formation from the moment it crosses the 100-mile range ring. Plot boards and combat information centers across the task force show the raid's course, speed, and approximate composition based on radar returns and early warning reports from submarines and patrol aircraft. Admiral Mitscher, advised by his Operations Officer Commander William Widhelm and Fighter Direction Specialist Commander John Thatch, decides to meet the attack with overwhelming force rather than the minimal combat air patrol that had proven sufficient against earlier Japanese raids. The American response demonstrates the tactical revolution that Mitscher and his staff have developed for mass carrier operations. Instead of each task group defending itself independently, Fighter Direction Control coordinates the actions of all available aircraft across the entire task force. At 0800 hours, a total of 220 F-6F Hellcats launch from 15 carriers, the largest single fighter formation ever assembled for defensive operations. The Hellcats climb to varying altitudes between 15,000 and 30,000 feet, positioning themselves in layers that will force Japanese attackers to fight through multiple defensive lines. Lieutenant Commander Brewer leads the first intercept at 0836 hours, engaging the Japanese formation 55 miles west of Task Force 58. His division of 4 Hellcats dives from 28,000 feet onto the Japanese fighters, achieving complete surprise and shooting down 3 Zeros in the opening attack. The engagement spreads across 20 miles of sky as more American fighters join the battle, using superior speed and firepower to break up the Japanese formation before it can reach the carriers. Radio coordination allows multiple divisions to attack simultaneously, while avoiding collisions and friendly fire incidents that had plagued earlier air battles. The technical superiority of American aircraft becomes apparent in the first minutes of combat. F-6F Hellcats consistently outperform Zero fighters in head-on attacks, using superior firepower and structural strength to destroy Japanese planes while surviving hits from lighter Japanese weapons. The 650 caliber machine guns of a Hellcat fire approximately 4,800 rounds per minute, creating a cone of destruction that no Japanese aircraft can survive. Zero fighters mounting two 20mm cannon and two 7.7mm machine guns lack the firepower to quickly disable heavily armored American fighters. Japanese dive bombers and torpedo bombers suffer catastrophic losses when caught without adequate fighter protection. The Judy dive bomber proves particularly vulnerable to Hellcat attacks, its high-performance design sacrificing structural strength and defensive armament for speed and agility. Several Judys explode in mid-air when hit by armor-piercing incendiary rounds from American machine guns, their fuel systems lacking the self-sealing capability that keeps American aircraft flying after similar damage. The few Japanese planes that survive the fighter interception face increasingly intense anti-aircraft fire as they approach Task Force 58. The combined anti-aircraft firepower of an Essex-class task group creates a defensive barrier unlike anything previously deployed at sea. Each carrier mounts 12 5-inch dual-purpose guns capable of firing proximity-fused shells that detonate near target aircraft rather than requiring direct hits. The surrounding battleships, cruisers, and destroyers add hundreds of additional guns ranging from 5-inch to 20mm calibers. Advanced fire control systems using radar guidance enable accurate shooting at aircraft flying at speeds and altitudes that would have been impossible to engage effectively just 2 years earlier. Admiral Mitscher watches the air battle from USS Lexington's flag bridge, receiving constant updates from Fighter Direction Control and maintaining radio communication with task group commanders. The tactical display in the Combat Information Center shows the systematic destruction of the first Japanese attack wave, with radar contacts disappearing as aircraft are shot down or driven away from their targets. By 0910 hours, only 27 of the original 69 Japanese aircraft remain operational, and these survivors are scattered and low on fuel with no prospect of coordinating an effective attack on the American carriers. The one-sided nature of the engagement leads to immediate changes in American pilot radio communications. Lieutenant Alexander Vrashew, flying from USS Lexington, shoots down 6 Japanese dive bombers in less than 8 minutes and radios his carrier with barely controlled excitement. Other pilots report similar success ratios, with entire Japanese formations being wiped out by single divisions of American fighters. The phrase that will give the battle its historical name originates from Commander Paul Buey aboard USS Lexington, who observes the slaughter of Japanese aircraft and comments over the radio, "Hell, this is like an old-time turkey shoot down home." Admiral Ozawa launches his second attack wave at 0900 hours, unaware that his first strike has been virtually annihilated. 128 aircraft take off from Carrier Divisions 1 and 2, including 48 Zero fighters, 53 Judy dive bombers, and 27 Jill torpedo bombers. This larger formation represents the main striking power of the mobile fleet, including some of the most experienced pilots remaining in Japanese carrier aviation. The attack plan calls for coordinated strikes against American carriers from multiple directions, overwhelming defensive fighters through simultaneous attacks that split American attention and resources. American radar operators detect the second wave launching from Japanese carriers and immediately begin vectoring additional fighters to intercept positions. The success of the first engagement allows Mitscher to commit even more aircraft to defensive operations, secure in the knowledge that Japanese striking power is being eliminated faster than it can be regenerated. A total of 140 F-6F Hellcats rise to meet the incoming raid, supported by radar control and real-time intelligence about Japanese formations and tactics. The second engagement begins at 0944 hours when Lieutenant Commander William Dean leads 8 Hellcats from USS Bunker Hill in a diving attack on the Japanese fighter escort. The Americans again achieve surprise through superior altitude and positioning, shooting down 12 Zeros in the opening minutes of combat. The remaining Japanese fighters find themselves fighting for survival rather than protecting their bombers, allowing additional waves of American fighters to attack the virtually defenseless strike aircraft. Japanese casualties mount with mathematical precision as American pilots exploit every advantage provided by superior aircraft, training, and coordination. The 97 aircraft of the second wave that survived the initial fighter attacks face anti-aircraft fire from ships that have been tracking their approach for nearly an hour. Proximity-fused shells from 5-inch guns create deadly patterns around the Japanese formations, while 40mm Bofors guns and 20mm Oerlikon cannons provide close-range defense that no aircraft can penetrate. Of the 128 aircraft in the second wave, only 31 survived to return to their carriers. The destruction of 2 major attack waves in less than 3 hours represents the largest single-day loss of aircraft in Japanese naval history. Admiral Ozawa has committed over 200 of his best planes and pilots to attacks that accomplished nothing beyond confirming American defensive superiority. The mobile fleet's striking power has been reduced by more than 50% while Task Force 58 has lost fewer than 30 aircraft, most to operational accidents rather than enemy action. The exchange ratio of better than 7-to-1 in American favor demonstrates the complete technological and tactical dominance that United States naval aviation has achieved by mid-1944. But the catastrophe for Japanese naval aviation extends beyond the loss of aircraft to the irreplaceable pilots who die with their planes. Each experienced Japanese aviator represents an investment of years of training that cannot be quickly replaced under wartime conditions. Flying schools in Japan are producing pilots with minimal flight hours and inadequate tactical training, rushed through abbreviated curricula that emphasize basic flying skills over combat techniques. The veterans lost over the Philippine Sea include section leaders, squadron commanders, and instructor pilots whose knowledge and experience cannot be replicated by new graduates from training programs. Admiral Ozawa's third attack wave launches at 1,000 hours with only 47 aircraft, reflecting the depleted state of his air groups after 2 disastrous engagements. The smaller formation consists of 15 Zero fighters, 25 Judy dive bombers, and 7 Jill torpedo bombers drawn from all 3 carrier divisions. Many of the pilots are flying their first combat mission, hastily briefed on American defensive capabilities that exceed anything in their training experience. The psychological impact of watching 2 previous waves disappear into the American defensive screen weighs heavily on aviators who understand they are likely flying to their deaths. American fighter directors detect the third wave and Vector 40 F-6F Hellcats to intercept the formation while it is still 60 miles from Task Force 58. The smaller number of American fighters reflects confidence in their ability to defeat any Japanese formation regardless of size, backed by the certain knowledge that anti-aircraft fire will destroy any bombers that penetrate the fighter screen. The interception occurs at 1,030 hours when Commander David McCampbell leads Fighting Squadron 15 in a coordinated attack that destroys 7 Japanese aircraft in the opening engagement. The few Japanese bombers that survive the fighter attacks press on toward Task Force 58 in what amounts to individual suicide missions rather than coordinated strikes. 3 Judy dive bombers reach the outer screen of destroyers and cruisers, only to be shot down by concentrated anti-aircraft fire before they can select targets. A single Jill torpedo bomber penetrates to within 5 miles of USS Lexington before being destroyed by proximity-fused shells from the carrier's 5-inch guns. Of the 47 aircraft in the third wave, only 7 returned to their carriers, and most of these are damaged beyond immediate repair. The systematic destruction of Japanese attack waves allows Task Force 58 to maintain its primary mission of supporting the amphibious landings on Saipan while simultaneously eliminating the mobile fleet's offensive capability. Unlike previous carrier battles where American forces had to choose between offensive and defensive operations, the massed firepower of 15 carriers provides sufficient aircraft for both missions simultaneously. Strike groups continue attacking Japanese positions on Saipan and Tinian while combat air patrol fighters massacre incoming raids with minimal effort. Admiral Ozawa's fourth and final attack wave launches at 1,130 hours with only 82 aircraft, the last reserve of the mobile fleet's striking power. The formation includes 27 Zero fighters, 30 Judy dive bombers, and 25 Jill torpedo bombers, but many of the pilots have been scrambled from training units and maintenance sections to replace the experienced aircrew lost in earlier attacks. The mission plan calls for the aircraft to refuel and rearm at airfields on Guam and Rota before attacking American forces, but these bases have already been neutralized by Task Force 58 strikes. American radar tracks the fourth wave as it approaches Guam, and fighter directors immediately recognize the opportunity to destroy Japanese aircraft while they are most vulnerable during landing operations. 27 F-6F Hellcats from USS Cowpens and USS Monterey intercept the Japanese formation over Orote Field on Guam, attacking during the landing pattern when enemy fighters cannot maneuver effectively. The slaughter is complete and systematic, with 30 Japanese aircraft shot down in 10 minutes while the remainder crash land on damaged runways or ditch in the ocean when their fuel runs out. The elimination of land-based aircraft on Guam completes the destruction of Japanese air power in the Marianas. Over 300 aircraft have been destroyed on the ground and in the air since June 12, leaving Admiral Ozawa with no base from which to stage operations against Task Force 58. The airfields that were supposed to serve as unsinkable aircraft carriers have become death traps for any Japanese planes that attempt to use them. American fighter sweeps over the islands encounter no aerial opposition and report only burning wreckage where once formidable air bases had threatened American operations. The scale of Japanese losses on June 19 exceeds the worst predictions of American intelligence officers who had studied the declining quality of Japanese pilot training and aircraft production. A total of 346 carrier aircraft have been destroyed along with approximately 50 land-based planes, reducing the mobile fleet's air strength by more than 75% in a single day. The exchange ratio of approximately 14-1 in American favor represents the most one-sided air battle in naval history, surpassing even the legendary fighter pilot achievement ratios achieved by individual aces in previous engagements. The human cost of the Japanese defeat extends far beyond the statistical loss of aircraft to encompass the destruction of irreplaceable aircrew, who represented the last experienced pilots in Japanese naval aviation. Approximately 148 Japanese airmen died on June 19, including squadron leaders, division commanders, and instructor pilots whose knowledge and skill could not be replaced by training programs operating under wartime constraints. The loss rate among torpedo bomber crews reached 49%, while dive bomber units suffered 39% casualties and fighter squadrons lost 20% of their pilots. American losses during the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot total 29 aircraft, most lost to anti-aircraft fire from their own ships during the confusion of mass air battles rather than to effective Japanese defensive action. The survival rate among American aircrews exceeds 95%, with most downed pilots rescued by destroyers and submarines stationed specifically for search and rescue operations. The contrast with Japanese pilot losses reflects not only superior aircraft and training but also the comprehensive support systems that enable American forces to sustain operations far from home bases. While Task Force 58 celebrates its defensive victory, Admiral Mitscher and his staff plan offensive operations that will complete the destruction of the mobile fleet. Reconnaissance aircraft from USS Enterprise locate the Japanese carriers late in the afternoon of June 19, steaming northwest at high speed in an attempt to escape the range of American aircraft. The distance to the target is at the extreme limit of American aircraft range, requiring a launch at 1,624 hours that will force pilots to return to their carriers in darkness with minimal fuel reserves. The decision to launch the late afternoon strike represents one of the most controversial command decisions of the Pacific War. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the Fifth Fleet, has explicitly ordered Mitscher to protect the amphibious forces on Saipan rather than pursue the Japanese fleet into deep water. But the opportunity to destroy the mobile fleet's remaining carriers may not come again, and Mitscher decides to risk aircraft and pilots in a maximum effort strike against the fleeing Japanese ships. 216 aircraft launch from Task Force 58 carriers between 1624 and 1640 hours, including 85 F-6F Hellcats, 77 SB-2C Helldivers, and 54 TBF Avengers. The strike force represents the largest single attack mounted by American carrier aviation, exceeding even the famous raids on Truk and Rabaul earlier in 1944. Lieutenant Commander James Minnie leads the formation in a race against time and fuel consumption, knowing that many aircraft will not have enough gas to return to their carriers regardless of the battle's outcome. The American strike locates the mobile fleet at 1840 hours, scattered across 20 miles of ocean, as Japanese commanders attempt to evade detection through course changes and speed variations. The carrier Hyo burns from earlier submarine damage, while Zuikaku and Junyo maneuver frantically to avoid the diving Helldivers that appear from high altitude with minimal warning. The attack lasts only 12 minutes but results in the sinking of Hyo and severe damage to Zuikaku, effectively ending the mobile fleet's ability to conduct further operations. The return flight to Task Force 58 becomes an epic of navigation and fuel management as American pilots fly through gathering darkness with gas gauges approaching empty. Radio beacons and radar guidance help some aircraft find their carriers, but many run out of fuel and ditch in the ocean between the battle area and the task force. The decision by Admiral Mitscher to turn on the lights illuminates the entire task force and provides visual reference for pilots attempting night landings on carriers moving at 30 knots through heavy seas. The recovery operations continue until after midnight as destroyers and cruisers search for pilots floating in life rafts scattered across hundreds of square miles of ocean. The final count shows 80 American aircraft lost during the mission, but most of the casualties result from fuel exhaustion and night landing accidents rather than enemy action. Of the approximately 160 aircrews involved in the strike, only 38 are killed or missing, with the remainder rescued by the extensive search and rescue organization that operates throughout the task force area. Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet withdraws toward Japan with 3 carriers sunk, 2 heavily damaged, and air groups reduced to fewer than 100 operational aircraft. The defeat represents the end of Japanese carrier aviation as an offensive force, eliminating the last hope for a decisive naval victory that might force American negotiation rather than unconditional surrender. The resources invested in training pilots and building aircraft cannot be replaced under the increasing pressure of American strategic bombing and submarine warfare against Japanese industry and supply lines. The strategic consequences of the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot extend far beyond the immediate tactical results to encompass the broader trajectory of the Pacific War. American control of the Marianas provides bases for Boeing B-29 Superfortress bombers that can reach the Japanese home islands, beginning the systematic destruction of Japanese industry and urban areas. The elimination of Japanese naval aviation removes the last significant obstacle to American amphibious operations throughout the Western Pacific, enabling the rapid advance toward the Philippines and ultimately to Japan itself. Task Force 58's victory demonstrates the effectiveness of massed carrier operations coordinated through radar and radio communication systems that provide unprecedented tactical control over large-scale air battles. The 15 Essex-class carriers and their supporting vessels represent the culmination of American naval aviation development, combining superior technology with industrial production capacity and pilot training programs that Japan cannot match. The ability to operate 96 aircraft from each carrier while maintaining defensive formations and coordinated offensive strikes establishes tactical doctrines that will influence naval aviation for decades. The technological advantages that enabled the American victory reflect investment in research and development that began before Pearl Harbor and accelerated throughout the war. Proximity-fused anti-aircraft shells increase the effectiveness of defensive fire by an order of magnitude compared to time-fused rounds that require precise range estimation. Radar fire control systems enable accurate shooting at aircraft flying at speeds and altitudes that would have been impossible to engage with optical directors. Most critically, the integration of radar detection, radio communication, and fighter direction creates a defensive system that can coordinate the actions of hundreds of aircraft with precision impossible in earlier battles. The industrial achievement represented by the Essex-class carriers equals the tactical victory in historical significance. 24 carriers built in less than 4 years represent the largest capital ship construction program in naval history, requiring the coordination of multiple shipyards, steel production facilities, and component manufacturers across the continental United States. The reduction of construction time from 3 or 4 years to 16 or 20 months demonstrates the effectiveness of mass production techniques applied to complex warships that incorporate the most advanced technology available. The pilot training programs that provided aircrews for Task Force 58 represent an equally impressive achievement in human resource development. American flight schools produced 800 new aviators per month by 1944, compared to Japan's maximum output of 100 pilots with substantially less training. The quality gap between American and Japanese pilots widened throughout the war as fuel shortages and combat losses reduced the effectiveness of Japanese training programs while American schools expanded and improved their curricula based on combat experience reports. Admiral Mitscher's tactical innovations in carrier operations establish principles that remain relevant to modern naval warfare. The concentration of multiple carrier air groups under centralized control enables coordinated strikes and defensive operations that exceed the capabilities of individual ships operating independently. The integration of radar detection, fighter direction, and radio communication creates a defensive system that can engage multiple threats simultaneously while maintaining offensive capability. Most importantly, the emphasis on pilot training and aircraft quality over numerical superiority demonstrates that technological and human advantages can overcome significant disparities in force strength. The defeat of Japanese naval aviation at the Battle of the Philippine Sea marks the transition from a war of roughly equal opponents to a systematic campaign of destruction against an enemy that lacks the resources to replace its losses. The mathematical precision of American victory, 346 Japanese aircraft destroyed versus 29 American planes lost, reflects industrial and technological superiority that Japan cannot overcome through tactical innovation or strategic planning. The remaining 18 months of the Pacific War will see Japan increasingly reduced to defensive operations and ultimately to kamikaze attacks that sacrifice pilots and aircraft for minimal military effect. The Essex-class carriers continue operations throughout the remainder of 1944 and into 1945, supporting amphibious landings from Leyte to Okinawa while conducting strategic bombing raids against the Japanese home islands. The class proves remarkably adaptable to evolving mission requirements, transitioning from fleet actions against Japanese carriers to close air support for ground forces and strategic bombing of industrial targets. The versatility of the Essex design enables the same ships to perform roles ranging from air superiority to interdiction to reconnaissance, demonstrating the value of multi-mission capability in naval aviation platforms. The human dimension of the victory encompasses not only the aircrew who flew the missions but also the thousands of sailors, engineers, and support personnel who maintained the complex systems that enabled Task Force 58 to operate at peak efficiency thousands of miles from American bases. The logistics achievement of supporting nearly 100,000 personnel and 1,000 aircraft in continuous operations represents a revolution in naval supply and maintenance techniques. Mobile service squadrons provide fuel, ammunition, replacement aircraft, and spare parts through underway replenishment operations that keep the task force operational for months without returning to major naval bases. June 19, 1944, establishes American naval aviation as the dominant force in the Pacific while simultaneously eliminating Japanese carrier aviation as a strategic threat. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot demonstrates that superior technology, training, and industrial capacity can achieve decisive results when properly integrated and employed with tactical innovation. The 15 Essex-class carriers of Task Force 58 represent not just a collection of individual ships but a weapons system that transforms naval warfare through the application of American industrial might and technological superiority. The final assessment of the battle reveals the extent to which American preparation and Japanese miscalculation combined to produce a result that exceeded the most optimistic American expectations. Admiral Ozawa's plan to supplement carrier aircraft with land-based planes failed when Task Force 58 neutralized Marianas airfields before the main battle. Japanese pilot quality had deteriorated to the point where even experienced squadron leaders could not effectively coordinate attacks against American defensive systems. Most critically, the technological gap between American and Japanese aircraft had widened to the point where individual combat became a mismatch rather than a contest between skilled opponents. The victory establishes the template for American naval operations in the final phase of the Pacific War, demonstrating that massed carrier operations can achieve strategic objectives while maintaining tactical flexibility and operational security. The lessons learned from the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot influence American planning for subsequent operations against heavily defended Japanese positions, confirming that overwhelming force applied with precision can minimize American casualties while maximizing damage to enemy capabilities. Admiral Mitscher's Task Force 58 steams toward the next objective, secure in the knowledge that Japanese naval aviation no longer poses a threat to American operations in the Western Pacific. The Essex-class carriers have proven their worth as the ultimate expression of American naval power, capable of projecting force across vast distances while defending themselves against any opposition the enemy can mount. The massed fast carrier punch that devastated Japanese air power in a single day represents the culmination of American naval development and the foundation for victory in the Pacific War. The mathematical precision of American victory on June 19, 1944, 956 American aircraft destroying over 400 Japanese planes at a cost of 29 losses demonstrates the complete technological and tactical superiority that United States naval aviation achieved through superior training, better aircraft, and innovative operational techniques. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot marks the end of Japanese naval aviation as an offensive force and the beginning of American naval supremacy that will last until the end of the Pacific War and beyond.